Okay, one of the commentators on the YouTube kind of criticized me for not disbelieving the fact that Israelites crossed over the Red Sea. He said this never happened, population wasn't big enough, and so on and so forth. Evidently he hasn't done his homework, so let's do a little homework on this. Go to this passage here on the Bible Study Manual's website. Copy down this address. Skeptics insist too many to cross the Red Sea. And my commentator says it never happened anyway. Objectors insist that a large group of people could not have successfully crossed the Red Sea, especially with the Egyptians in pursuit. It comes with all kinds of wrong information that it's not even in the Bible. They put that all together and say, see, it's not feasible. Well, yeah, you made up stuff that didn't occur and said, see, it didn't occur. Well, okay. Now, the truth of the matter, more likely, is the name of the Red Sea, Sea of Reeds, is another sea. We don't know the origination of the Red Sea, but we know it's translated Red Sea. And so we did a little historical analysis of the origin of the word. It means seaweed or marine plants, general term for marine plants, part of the word. So you can read that there. So we have the Red Sea. The events following Moses' flight from Egypt into Midian, a land east of the Gulf of Aqaba, provide a clue as to the location of Mount Sinai, to where the children of Israel traveled after leaving Egypt. Now, during the 40 years Moses was in Midian, 40 years he was there, he attended the sheep of his father-in-law, Jethro. And while Moses was tending Jethro's sheep, he had experienced the burning bush, and that was nearby. People think that the Red Sea crossing and Mount Sinai, which has Mount Sinai in the wilderness, Sinai wilderness, that's much too far away from Midian in Arabia. The mountain where Moses saw the burning bush presumably was in the region where Jethro lived, since Moses was pasturing Jethro's flocks there. The traditional Mount Sinai is over 300 miles by land from Jethro's home in a region where there is very little water or pasture. So it's unlikely that it was where they think it was, and they say, and even Bibles have it printed, that's where it's located. To make an Arabic location of Mount Sinai more certain, the Bible specifically says that Horeb, Mount Sinai in Deuteronomy 4:10, where Moses had the experience of the burning bush, is in Midian, Exodus 3:1. So I don't know how these Bible illustrators got the wrong information and why they did that. Of course, if Sinai is in Arabia, that location offers many more choices for crossing the Red Sea than a location for Mount Sinai, Mount Musa at St. Catherine's. For the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba is the border between Egypt and Arabia for hundreds of miles. So that's very feasible. Matter of fact, it's probably what it is. Besides specifying that Sinai is in Midian, which is in what was Arabia during the time of Paul, Galatians 4:25, the Bible gives many indications that Israel crossed the Red Sea at the Gulf of Aqaba, not Lake Serbonus or Bitter Lakes or North Suez. These latter sites are too far north and do not provide any reason why Israel should have been trapped there. It's all flat beach there, those other three suggestions, and they do not take into account the elapsed time of about 25 days from leaving Egypt to the Red Sea, crossing this area called Pi Hahiroth. 25 days. The other three locations are a matter of days away, so why do they take 25 days? See, it all fits this position here, and we keep looking at it, and it fits even better and better. So they left on the 15th of the month, the children of Israel. We have this number of days. We add up in each spot just by reading Scripture and adding the days. 25 days, not 2 or 3. The New Testament makes explicit what the Old Testament implies. Paul says that Mount Sinai is in Arabia, Galatians 4:25. And Israel had to cross the Red Sea somewhere at the Gulf of Aqaba in order to stay out of the Promised Land and to get to Arabia. Now, if you go into Sinai wilderness, that's still influenced and actually considered part of Egypt in those days, because Egypt didn't adopt that. Proper Egypt is less than that, but the Sinai wilderness across the Gulf there, the Red Sea there, they had influenced and had commercial interest there with some mines and a few other things. So that was considered Egyptian territory. Now we have one feasible location for the 2 million plus Israelites' successful crossing of the Red Sea, and that's along the western shore of the Gulf of Aqaba, the Nuweiba Peninsula in Egypt. It is a sandy beach in Egypt, 4.25 miles long by 2 miles wide, which could accommodate several million people and their flocks and herds. It can be located on a map by starting at the northmost tip of the Gulf of Aqaba on the Egyptian side and then going 50 miles south. It is the site that best matches the biblical account. Note that the Gulf of Aqaba was called the Red Sea in ancient times, 1 Kings 9:26. So that's what they called it. Let's go with what they called it. Say here's the wilderness. Say Egypt is right here, proper Egypt. Then we have the wilderness, which is a great influence of Egypt in commercial areas. So the map shows Egypt there too. The way of the wilderness of the Red Sea is what it's called in Scripture. And they say this is Mount Ionis, Etham, okay. Succoth, Etham, down here, the wilderness of Etham, all in the Bible. And then we go here and we go all the way down here, 50 miles south, and there's Nuweiba Beach. Excellent crossing site. And in there, some guys went in there and did some scuba diving, and they found chariot wheels and bones of humans and horses. Typical Egyptian chariot wheels, which were very unique. They were very advanced chariots in those days, and that's why they were such a superior empire. And the military to back it up. Gulf of Aqaba, Gulf of Suez, see? I hope you can see that in the white. Over there they have a picture there in the lower part here that shows the burned top of the mountain. Well, anyway, having departed Ramses, the children of Israel arrived at their first encampment at Succoth, at the northern end, which we just looked at on the map, what is today called the Gulf of Suez, whereupon they traveled through the wilderness of the Red Sea, to the Red Sea, through what is called the Sinai Peninsula. And they went through that, and to the other side of it, the final part of the journey was evidently through a mountainous region, which has indicated that the Israelite people, 2.5 million approximately, were blocked in. They'd go back now against the chariot army coming down their throat, down to the Wadi Watir Canyon Trail after them, and it terminated the Gulf of Aqaba and Nuweiba Beach. On either side were mountains. They had no choice to go. Sea, couldn't climb up over the mountains or go back into the teeth of the chariot army. The Israelites would have been traveling from Succoth to Pi Ha-Hiroth at the Red Sea along this natural road, a portion of which was frequently used as a trade route before the caravans turned northway toward Canaan, where the Israelites went southward through a wide mountain gorge to the sea. And that's that Wadi Watir Canyon Trail between mountains. Once on this last leg of the sojourn to the Red Sea, retreat was impossible because of the mountains around. So they had to press on with great numbers of people, flocks, and herds right to the edge of the sea. Well, maybe the beach wasn't big enough. Yes, it was, 4.5 by 2.5 miles. Plenty of beach. The Israelites' journey through the mountainous terrain is described in Scripture, reference Exodus 14:1-4, does not coincide with what some contend was a journey down the eastern shore, Gulf of Suez, of the western branch of the Red Sea to the Straits of Tiran, today called the Gulf of Suez, across a continuous coastal plain of 200 to 500 feet above sea level. Sandy beaches, flat, no mountains. How do they get trapped? But the location of the opposite shore of the Red Sea to which the children of Israel crossed is stipulated in Scripture as Baal Zephon, which is the name of the supreme god of the Canaanites. A likely location would be closer to the land of Canaan in Arabia, and so far south into the headwaters of the Gulf of Suez at the Straits of Tiran. It wasn't there. Canaan wasn't over there on that other side, the eastern side. Canaan is located far to the northeast. in the Promised Land, Israel's final destination. So Josephus wrote in Antiquities of the Jews, confirming that the route was mountainous. Now, when the Egyptians had overtaken the Hebrews, so he confirms the fact that there indeed was a chase, Egyptians after the Hebrews. So there was somewhat of a potential cross there over the Red Sea. They prepared to fight them, and by their multitude they drove them into a narrow place. For the number that pursued after them was 600 chariots with 50,000 horsemen, and 200,000 footmen, all armed. They all seized on the passages by which they imagined the Hebrews might fly, shutting them up between inaccessible precipices and the sea. So they had only one way to go, in the sea or turn and get destroyed. For there was on each side mountains that terminated at the sea, right at the sea. Ideal spot for this biblical account. These were impassable by reason of their roughness and obstructed their flight. So the army obstructed their flight. They couldn't get over it anyway. Wherefore they pressed upon the Hebrews with their army, where the ridges of the mountains were closed with the sea, which army they placed at the gaps of the mountains, so they might deprive them of any passage into the plain. Take a look at the map here. See, this is Egypt proper. This is where the Sinai Peninsula is. Egypt had a great commercial influence there. Basically, that was the Egyptian area. And so they had to go from here all the way down where the caravan trail stopped, and they went south into the wasIsrael'sPopulation passage and ended up crossing at the Gulf of Aqaba right here. This is the Gulf. This is the other branch of the Red Sea, which they called in the Bible the Red Sea. And crossed over here, and here's the location of Mount Sinai, not here, but here, because it's in Midian. It's in Arabia, and Paul said so in Galatians 4:25. So here's Egypt proper, the darker green, the region subject to Egypt. If you're subject to Egypt, Egypt considers that their property. So the map above indicates that Midian and Mount Sinai are in Saudi Arabia, not the Sinai Peninsula. Ancient Egypt proper is shown in dark green, light green areas were subject to Egyptian rule. Whatever Egyptians ruled, that's their territory. Now here's the view of the Wadi Watir Canyon Trail above. It was kind of winding trail. The Israelites came here, and they could go further up north to Canaan, or they go through the Wadi Watir Trail, coming down here, and into this Nuweiba beach area, and there's the Red Sea. Here's a view of the Nuweiba beach at the end of the Wadi Watir Trail from the water up. There's some buildings over there that are ancient that are being restored, showing the Egyptian fortress there. So that was obvious that they had a fortress there in this wilderness area. That was their territory. You didn't come through, you get met with an army there, force. Note the buildings on the right side of the beach thought to be Migdol, an ancient Egyptian fortress which blocked the northern escape route along the beach. It is today being restored and a coat of stucco added. More pictures here. Red Sea crossing, there's Nuweiba Beach. There's Migdol. There's a column. Solomon built 2 columns on the Egyptian side and also on the Arabian side, commemorating this crossing. And chariot, the picture of the water, chariot wheels and bones were discovered. So the Israelites evidently took the route of the winding Wadi Watir Trail, Canyon Trail, to where it terminated in Nuweiba Beach. Old maps designated this, old ones. And look at scripture, and it's plausible, very plausible, corroborated. Children of Israel were disconsolate. No graves in Egypt. They'd be taken us to die in the wilderness. And that's when God actually set up a different plan for the destruction of Pharaoh and Egypt's armies and their escape. Now this is the account. Baal and Zephon across the Red Sea. They would get there. They would camp there before Migdol, all 2.5 million. We'll look into that. How did the population reach that?